Hello and welcome to another Max Chroma tutorial video. In this video, I'm going to be going over some more of the Max Chroma Photo Tessellator Free Patterns Pack 1. This is a digital download product I have available on my payhip.com/maxchroma web store. If you click on this link, you can go to the product. You can download it now, and you could just enter in any email address you want, your email address, or just something that isn't real. It's okay. You can still download it. So you get these files. I'll show you right here, and we can just continue on in this video like I was in the previous video, showing some more ways that this works. And I wanted to go over using this in Greyscale in these videos first before I show you some of the ways it works in color. And that's because it'll just be easier to understand as I explain it and show how all of this stuff works really differently than what we're used to with halftones and patterns. So I'm going to open up this Greyscale Photo Tessellator Colorizer 300 DPI with free patterns file. It's a Photoshop document. And just like in the previous video, I showed how it has these test images and these grayscale values on the left-hand side. And let's just look at this again in terms of what this is without all these extra layers. And I'm going to just delete them. Okay, and we got this other city pattern, or this city image right here too. So, and I think I'm just going to delete the pattern fill layer, and we'll start with it like in the folder. There are these elliptical halftone dot, line halftone, and round halftone dot, and these are just images. Okay, these are little 64 pixel, they're not very big, they're just 64 pixels each, little PNG images, and they're just grayscale images that are what's in the pattern file. And if I go and bring each of these images into here, okay, I'm going to grab all three of them. I'm going to move them over to here. All right, and you can see they're very small when they load it into this. And they load it in as smart objects, so they're not necessarily, this is at 300 DPI, and so the resolution of these things, if I wanted them to be like 100% of what they are, you know, I might have to change this to be, I don't know, 1200 DPI, and it would work, the whole image basically. Let's try that. Let's go to resample the whole image, 1200 DPI. Let's do nearest neighbor. Okay, I'm going to go over to these, and we're going to look at them in their full native resolution. Okay, but they're at their largest size, which is 64 pixels. Okay, by 64 pixels. So you get these three patterns, and I think I'll organize them like so this one on the left is the round dot, this one in the middle is the elliptical dot, this one is the line dot. And so if I put each of these together, I'm going to group them, and then I'm going to also duplicate the group. I want to set one group to this hard mix blending mode. Okay, that's the special way that it takes this pattern and converts it into a threshold array over the background image. And then I'll take this other group above it and just duplicate it. I'll set it to normal, and I'll just turn this down to like, I don't know, 30% or 40%, so you can see the pattern around it. Let's say 50%. So that I have one set of the layers just showing you the pattern that we have, and then the threshold one, and we're going to group this together. So I'm just going to use this to test and show in this video. So I'm over the 254 level, and you see it just makes this small little dot in the center. If I move this over to this one, the 253, it's a bigger dot. Up to 237, larger. And there's a better way to show this too, which is, let me go down here to where there's nothing. I'm going to put in a color below this in a fill layer. Okay. And I'm just going to start to go down and add value to a decrease value in the brightness, or basically adding, you know, blackness to this underneath it. And you'll see the dot go from a small point. I'm just going to use the scroll wheel. And that dot gets larger and larger, and you see how it's a circle here, an ellipse here, and a line there. And it keeps going and going once it gets to like this near the 50% range, it's going to start to turn into like a checkerboard or a square on the round dot, more of a diamond on the elliptical, and just still just a line in the line dot. And then as it gets bigger, it turns into the negative, okay? And so that's these dots in the corner, which really just make up one whole dot if you put them together, and the ellipses, and then the lines, the negative part. Okay, so you see how that works and why this is basically just a threshold that converts something of a grayscale value into these dots. But then how does it work to create a whole halftone pattern? Well, that's why it's like a seamless pattern that you can repeat. And I'll just duplicate this group like this, sort of just fake it for like a little bit and show you. Okay, so if then you put this over different values, it turns to those. And then if you put it over some other stuff, it would basically show the values. And then what happens is you got to make it a lot smaller. So let's just get rid of that and put the actual pattern over it. But I think another way to show this is I'll just lasso an area, then put the pattern in. So if you load the patterns in as a patterns file, you've got these round dot, elliptical line. So I'll load the round dots. And then I can make the scale larger or smaller. And if I'm in the latest version of Photoshop, I need to go back to like 300 DPI to do stuff in this video and have it be, working out, not just like slowing down the system and the video. You got to be very careful the resolutions you work at, the sizes of your images, and what you start to do with these patterns and this halftone tessellation stuff, because yes, it can be used for very precise purposes and professional uses, but your computer system just has to be able to handle that. I'm starting off showing this stuff mostly 300 DPI, mostly just for fun and all the possibilities, and I need to teach it that it's like a method of extracting the information from an image into patterns, converting it into halftones, or working with stuff just for fun. But I want to show all of the sort of fundamentals of how it works so that you can kind of see. You can make it yourself, you can work with it. The 300 DPI thing, it's mostly about the processing power of a computer and whether it can handle this kind of stuff. So we put this pattern on it, and I just changed the DPI to 300, make this a little bit easier. I'll set this pattern maybe to like 20%, and then I'm going to set the mix to hard mix, and I think I'll also duplicate it, set this to a normal, put the opacity down at like 50%, and group it, and we'll try that same thing where we have the pattern. Okay, you can see how the pattern turns into those dots. And this is the other thing about resolution. When you're at a smaller resolution, sometimes there just isn't enough information for it to find a pixel to convert into the dots. You see there's only a few showing up. The pattern repeating doesn't have enough data inside it. So that's other stuff I'll get into in another video about these patterns and how, at 16 by 16 pixels, and it's the same thing as if you were to convert this stuff with the Photoshop bitmap mode, converting it to halftone patterns, there's a level at which they can't capture all 256 levels of gray because you're not giving it enough pixels of information. And these things are specially crafted to where, especially if you look at the line one, this is a good way to teach this part about it. You see how this line halftone pattern is all dithered or jagged, and when you put it over, like let's just do this right here, put it over like a gray value set to hard mix, and it makes that line, right, the line halftone. But you see like the line is all jagged, right? And why is it all sort of jagged like that and not clean? Well, you could do one, and I have other halftone patterns in the other packages and stuff and I'll show and teach how to make these patterns. You could do one that has all 256 levels of gray and one line for each level of gray, but then you need 256 pixels in each direction, and the line pattern would be very large to capture it that way. So these things have been crafted in a certain way where within a 16 by 16 pixel area, it can still capture all 256 levels. And so that's just a little side note about how these things work. But when you go in lower resolutions, you're not going to give them enough, pixels to work if you're trying to capture every level of gray into like a dot. But for the most part, let's just look at what this is doing. Okay, and you have this pattern. I've just got a selection. It's set to the pattern that has the hard mix blending mode, converts it to a halftone. I got one that's just a little bit faded over it. And maybe I'll take the faded one and make it a little larger. Okay. And I might make sure that the patterns are snapped to origin so they're in the same position. There we go. All right. So you can see that this converts an underlying image into this. And then when I change the size of the pattern, I'm changing the size of the dot, right? And like if I just go to this and change the scale of it as well. Okay, and I think I'll turn off the other one. We'll just look at the hard mix blending mode one. We'll make this area a little bit larger. And I'll make the halftone scale a little bit smaller. Okay. And in the latest version of Photoshop 23, you can also change the angle. So maybe I'll set that to like 22.5. And I'll try to work in a decent resolution. If you were to work at about 600 DPI, you could do some stuff that maybe you could work with if you wanted to like print these halftone patterns. So setting this up, maybe I'll keep it at like 20% scale. I just want to show moving this selection around. You can see what it does. It really converts the underlying data of your grayscale imagery into halftone patterns. And those are going to be faithful, especially at around 600 DPI. Okay, it should be able to capture most of the levels of 256 grayscale levels. All right, and this is the round halftone dot. Now I could also convert, I could just change this on the fly to the elliptical halftone dot or the line halftone dot. Let's look at it with the line. And you see very clearly with the lines the angle that it's at 22.5, right? And in the previous video, I showed how you could make this into converting not just black and white, but also grayscale, or adding gray levels into the halftones, and they all interlock together. So this is like creating a color separation immediately, but you can always take your images and convert them in Photoshop through the bitmap mode and get these patterns. I'm just setting it up in a way that now it's like a pattern in Photoshop that you can apply over a background image. And I don't know, there's just so much cool stuff you can do with it. So let's say I had it over the city image. I'll put an entire pattern fill set to the lines. Maybe I'll set it to like 45. Okay. And then set this to hard mix. All right. Let's zoom out a bit. And I think for this, I'll just do 300 DPI. I want to show you some fun with this. Okay. And we're going to set the blending mode to hard light, and then we're going to put a posterizer over it. Why don't you just see how this is manually done? It's very simple. Set this to 3 levels. All right, and I'm going to set the fill on the hard light blending mode of the pattern to 33%. And I'm also going to maybe change the angle a bit, like maybe just like horizontal to start with, because this is really cool what I'm going to show you that's possible now. That really is almost, it's very hard to do if you tried it with the other methods, like just converting an image to halftone patterns. If I take this, that's all converted to black, gray, and white, I could put a color gradient map over it and change the black point, the gray point, okay, and the white point, and let's say I just make it to like this, okay, right here. And then I've got this city image like that, and maybe I'm going to change the scale a little bit to like 30%. Okay, and sometimes if you're looking at this stuff, and depending on how it seems, if you take a snapshot of it and bring it up to the top layer, Control-Alt-Shift-E, and then blur that together, you can kind of make it look a little bit cleaner visually. Seeing what you're looking at already, that looks pretty cool already, right? But I want to take this pattern, underlying it, and I'm going to actually convert the entire pattern. Let me turn off the blending mode to normal, set the fill to 100, and Control-E, merge a new layer with it. So now it's just a layer, okay? I'm also going to blur it just a, oops, I want to blur it just a little. Let me cancel that. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur, just like 0.5. Okay, so now over the background city image, I'm going to take this. I'm also going to put a levels in here, and I might add some contrast to this city image, right? Put this pattern over it, so you just see exactly how these things are working. It's just a pattern with some lines, and it's just grayscale lines. Like, you could just do this very easily. Setting it to the hard mix is really just like a threshold, and that threshold works so where it's darker it makes a thicker line, and where it's lighter it makes a thinner line, right? And the reason is because it's just thresholding that area differently. And so let's now put the hard light blending mode. So there's a little bit more gray, like grayscale stuff coming through, and then set the fill to 33. Now you can see it's just kind of like a pattern overlaying over that image. And then when you set the posterizer, it basically converts those into a black and a gray and a white when you have it set to 3 levels. And what that does is ends up making this black, gray, and white interlocking line pattern. Now if I put the gradient map over that, I convert all that stuff to the colors that I wanted. And there's one more thing that's really just insane that you can do. Now that this pattern right here, if I look at it again by itself, like normal, 100%. Now that this pattern is like sitting here in a layer, I can do things to it that I couldn't do before as a pattern fill. And so we could transform it. And also when you have this over the background, set to the blending mode like a hard mix or the hard light one. So let me set it up again. So I got the levels, this set to hard light, set to 33%. That's just because of the posterizer being set to level 3. And in fact, you know, let's set it to 4 levels and set this to 24%. So I'll show you how it works. You lower the fill percentage and you increase the posterizer another level, and you get now a black, a dark gray, a middle gray, a white. And now I can set the gradient map up that way. The light gray point's at like 67%. The darker gray point is at like 33%, okay? And so I can change that to a color and change this one to a color. So I have like a dark blue, like dark purple, a light purple, violet, sort of rose color, and like yellow. And it's all those points in the gradient map. So it's like, and then the levels, or you could also, there's a different way to do it. I'll show it in the next example. But with the levels, I'll just show you controlling the levels underneath all that, literally changing. I mean, if you see this and you understand what's happening, it's really on a whole other level. Changing the levels of this, seeing that pattern change like that, that's all well and cool, amazing. But what about this part? Now you can change and transform the entire pattern itself underlying the image. And so I'm going to do actually some warp stuff. I want to do the grid of like 3 by 3 maybe, or a little bit more of the grid. I'm going to literally start warping this pattern. Okay, just move this down here. All right, and we'll do this like so. All right, that's finished. I'm gonna go ahead and now I think I'll take this and go up to about 600 dpi. We'll do some smooth gradients. And then we will blur this a little bit more. Okay. Maybe like 1 pixel. Merge this all together. And then blur it about 4 pixels or so. Maybe even a little bit more. Let me put this on top. Oh, there we go. Okay. And I might soften up some of those areas here. But I mean, most of this, I'm just trying to show you what's possible. You can just do some insane things here. So I used this whole pattern to convert this city image into a recolorized pattern of line halftones, and then I warped them as well. Totally fun. You can do anything you want with this stuff. The other use that I have for it, one of the reasons I developed it and sort of wanted to crack into all these things at this level, okay, and maybe I won't get to this example in this video, but I want to show this one. Let's say I had a professional reason I wanted to print this image and do like a screen print. I wanted to do it with a couple of colors. You can do it in just black and white, and you can do the image mode grayscale to this image. If I already have the image in about, let's see, 1200 dpi, and let's say my final print size I wanted to do is like 12 inches or so. Okay, and I'm just going to crop in a little bit to this. So I could attempt to just convert this to a bitmap using Photoshop, 1200 dpi to 1200, halftone screen, and I could say, you know, maybe like a highline screen, 65 or so, 22.5 degrees, round halftone pattern. And then it's like, oh, it makes it into all those shades of gray, and it's all these halftone dots. But the problem is, if you're going to make a screen of this and then print it, it's very difficult to make all this work out perfectly and have those shades not get darker in some areas, get lighter in some areas. It's just, are you going to hold all that detail perfectly? Sometimes you need to just make it easier and put more colors in there and just use a gray. So how do you add the gray automatically? And that's something where maybe Photoshop doesn't do so easily automatically with the bitmap conversion mode. But that's where this halftone pattern stuff comes into play. And so let's look at it again. Just put on the pattern with the round dot right here, set to, you know, maybe about 30% or so would be a 65 LPI dot, 22.5 degrees, okay, set to the hard mix blending mode. And when you see it at first, it's going to look like it's something going on with it. Sometimes when you're at a zoom level in Photoshop, it doesn't show it as well in the halftone when it's a halftone pattern overlay. Okay, I can kind of scroll around with it here, it looks right, but I zoom out a bit, it might just sort of snap to some wrong looking way. If I add another layer and put the, merge it together, this will show me a little bit more true what all that stuff, all the halftone is doing when I'm zoomed out. So now I can zoom out a bit and see that better, right? Okay, so you know, the same thing, would I attempt to do it like this, and just from my perspective, like the things that I would do if they were saying, oh, I want to print this on a t-shirt, screen print it, I'm going to immediately look at this particular image and say, well, I don't know, I would want to use like a dark gray or a couple of grays and black to do this. And if it's on a white shirt, a little easier, but I would want to maintain the faithful reproduction of some of these soft and darker values because they are really dark. Like this is down in 11%. Gray, this one right here is like 32% or so. And so this, the other powerful professional use of these files, and I think I'm gonna set the file to about 300 dpi when I'm working on it, okay, and then upscale it once I'm ready and done. But I'll put this pattern file in here. All right, set the round dot. I'll set it to 22.5 degree angle. I'll change the scale later, but let's do like 30% for now. And I'm going to set this to the hard light and about 24%. And we're going to try to get those 2 levels of gray out of it. And I'm going to go to now put a posterizer in there and set that to the to 4. Now the one thing we're getting is like the black and the dark gray, and then the middle, the lighter gray and white. But are they in the areas that I really want them to be? Can I actually change that and customize it? And that's where all the stuff from all the other videos that I was doing about the gradient maps comes into play. And that's why I'm sort of showing all these videos and all these products in a certain order and developing them along the way. And I have to make all these videos. I have to sort of keep the videos short and do a little bit at a time, but there's just so much to share and so much to go over. So I got to just do them as often as I can. But the way that this one is now playing off of that other stuff is you can put a gradient map in here. And again, this is really simple stuff in Photoshop. If you know like how to use some of the tools, the gradient map on a grayscale image is a good way to do color separation of it. And so I can take the gradient map, set it to a regular, just black to white. And I'm going to have 0% smoothness and classic if you're in the new Photoshop where you have different methods. And so it does a faithful reproduction of all those tones. I can go in and now set the tone where it's 11%. Let's do 11 and see the 11% location as well. So the 11% location, and this is set to 11. And then we have this set to, let's do 32 and set this value to 32 brightness. Okay, so now I can change the image. I can add colors to it. You can see I got control over that stuff. So hold on, let me just hit OK, change this back to 11. Okay, and we're in grayscale mode. That's the thing. I got to change this to RGB mode. Don't flat. All right, so I could take this color, this gradient map, and add color. But just to show you, I've got control over that gray point, blending to black. And I've got control over this gray point, blending to the darker gray and fading out to wherever it would fade to white, like over here. All right. So it's the dark gray and the light gray gradient map over this original image. And that would be a way that I could attempt to color separate it. And maybe I would set one of these to white, set this other one to white. Now I've got the dark gray separation. And I could try to convert this if I also make this point black. I could convert this to halftones, turn those halftones into a certain pattern, and just do the same thing for the others, but just do an invert on each of them so I could try to interlock the dots. I could try to do all that stuff manually, and it would take a long time, and it would all be sort of destructive to the underlying art. But let's just keep the, let's undo. I'll go back and get the gradient map I had a minute ago, which just has the gray levels in it. Can we now just do this in real time with the halftone pattern overlay? So let's set the gradient map up like that. And then we know that this is going to convert dark gray and light gray when I have this set to hard light 24% fill. Turning the posterizer on set to 4. I'm going to see a black, a dark gray, and a light gray and a white. So what if I just modify the underlying art and say, make this 11 position at the 11 location, 11% brightness, change the brightness of it to 33, and then take this one right here, which is at the 32% location, 32% brightness, and change that to 66 or 67, I think is about right for the next light gray point. Okay, so we've recolorized, and again, turn off the halftone pattern, turn off the posterizer. I'm just using a gradient map to lighten and change the colors of this grayscale image. Then the pattern and the fill percentage along with the posterizer converts that to halftone dots. I can go and make another gradient map. So following along how all this stuff works and goes together, let's just have 0% smoothness and just black to white and set it to classic mode. And then with this gradient map, I can now change that 33% location and the 67% location. So let's change the 33 one. Instead of being 33, let's change it to 11. And let's change the 67 point to 32. Okay, so now I've actually gone and turned this image into, with a whole set, and I'll just group all of these layers together. So with this group, I converted this image into a separation of black to dark gray to a lighter gray all the way to white. And I could go to the original image and still do things like put levels on that, maybe move some of this background, these gray dots in the background, just convert them to a little bit lighter, like white, just force those to white. Okay, and then what about all the dots are really big, right? So let's now take this and go image size and do 1200 DPI, and this might take a minute to process. I'm gonna change this to nearest neighbor, hit okay. And I'm gonna control, oh, okay. And now I wanna change the scale of this pattern. So see, it went to 120% down to 30. And then I'm gonna duplicate the image. So I wanna take one of them and really just flatten it so I can like show you guys the flattened version of it. But the other one, I'll see if I can zoom in and work with it. But it gets a little bit, like I still, myself want to get a computer that can handle this stuff a little better. So, I might want to have something that's got way more processing power and more RAM, etc., a better graphics card that can do these things in real time at high resolution. Just because of the way I work, I start to build up large files. So here is the finished file, and I can zoom in and maybe just like pan around. And so we can see this is how it should look if you're doing a professional color separation. And, you still might clean up some of the edges if you want to, but, it has like the detail of the treads of the tire, the rim. And I could do this in three colors. I would have black and a dark gray and this lighter gray and over a white background. And so you can see how this captures all that detail. And I was able to get those gradients between like the darker gray and the other gray and sort of capture all this stuff really well. But I could go into that other file, okay? And this is the whole reason I like this stuff. You can do things that you really can't predict as well. So I could go into this and really change stuff around a little bit. See, I changed the levels and that changed some things. So I want to actually undo that levels, right? See, when I moved the levels point, it actually got rid of some of the way I had those points picked out. If I want to move that white point up there, let me zoom out a bit. I'm just gonna grab the zoom tool, maybe zoom in up here. I think I would use the gradient map, this first one, because I have control over where this point gets affected. And I think I would just move this in a little bit so that it doesn't change that lighter gray point. So moving that in, letting go, it's in 1200 DPI, so it takes a second to update, even if it does. I can hit OK. It did update. Let me Control-O to just Control-0 to back out for a second. And let me zoom in on that. It's not going to work really. Sometimes it's so much processing it's trying to do that you don't even see what's happening, like the selection doesn't work. But anyway, I'm going to try to show you guys with this. So it stopped and did it real quick for a second. Plus I'm recording a video. I have this video going on the whole time. So you see I have control over those points, and I can change, like, let's say the point between the two, I could change it here and sort of move the curve of the dark gray to the lighter gray. And that should update where that is affecting things here. Yep. And if I wanted, like, it's sort of making like the more contrast between the two. All right, hit OK. Control-O just to, like, sometimes when you zoom all the way out, it like happens quicker because it just goes back to the previous preview of it. Okay, so I'm going to try to duplicate this again. So I'll take this one, maybe close it, and I'll duplicate this one again, and then flatten it. And so, but really, I like this is the kind of thing I enjoy showing, because the way that I would have worked before, and that's, I have like those plugins that do things in a way which processes all of the imagery, turns it into separations, converts those to halftones, puts them into layers all together. You would never have that control to go back to the original art, change something about it, etc. And then if I go to this one, I can also, again, go to that other recolorizer, and I can actually change these dots. Like, it doesn't have to be this gray, it could be a color. Okay, like this. I can literally, you know, if I was, this would be more like if you're printing this in that color, right? And, you know, maybe I'll duplicate that one, look at it, flatten the image. And I could try to bring in more of the black. There's like not a lot of black going on. It's mostly detail and some of the darkest shades of the image. But it's like stuff that you wouldn't, it'd be a lot harder when you're trying to build the separations the other way and then convert them into halftones and do all that. You can do all this with just a few steps. And again, this is just showing it only on a grayscale underlying image, and only on, you know, so I mean, that's just pretty cool. So it's only on a grayscale underlying image. I'm only adding color by changing what I would be printing, or what the other final view of it is with these colorized dots. But these interlocking halftone patterns, to me, this is just some of the coolest stuff. For me, it's like artwork in its own right, but it's also stuff you can print with, especially at this 1200 DPI level. All right, and then here's the other one that I changed into color. All right, but this isn't even at any kind of advanced level yet of separation of very difficult artwork, or doing stuff. It's just converting things to those interlocking dots, doing some remapping with the gradients, and using the free pattern pack of the Max Chroma photo tessellator and the round halftone dots, etc. So all this stuff, just insane, right? I'm going to stop this video here, and I'm going to continue on with more videos in this series. The photo tessellator just takes things to a whole new level. I wanted to show you guys some fun ways to use it and some professional ways, and then get into stuff in the next videos and show you guys what you could get when you pay for the Max Chroma Photo Tessellator Pattern Pack and the Photo Tessellator 2022 version with all these other files. But this stuff is just like starting off, give you something for free. You could do these things with Photoshop with the bitmap mode, but extracting those halftone patterns was like a really difficult part. So I wanted to do that, put it out, give you guys something to start with, and then we'll continue in more videos. So thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to get updates to the new videos that I release, and then hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Share it if you think others will find this stuff useful. Thanks, and see you in the next video.